All right, and we are back for more Return to Castle, New Order Stein of the Old Republic. Liechtenstein. Return to Castle Liechtenstein. But, yeah, the Nostalgia Critic, as we were discussing earlier on, he didn't like just being the Nostalgia Critic. He wanted to be a so-called real comedian, and he lost his audience for that. And you can tell this, and then the review talks about this as well. Well, not the review, the video talks about this as well. But I also saw it myself, because I was once a big fan of him and Channel Awesome in general, or That Guy with Glasses when it was called that. But you could already tell after the brawl, which was from, I think, 2010, that everybody started to really just be enamored with themselves. And hubris is one of the biggest problems with anything. When you really become enamored with yourself and think you can't do when you think you can do no wrong, then you start to have some problems. Let's see, we still have no Sturmgewehr ammo whatsoever. And the K98K, since we're so hurt right now, since the K98K is a one-hit kill, we're going to use that. Okay, we need to get that Hauptsturmführer. So we know he's an actual SS man, and I guess the guys in the yellow shirts are just really unfashion conscious. Here. No, I gotta try to pronounce it right. Here. Is that right? Here? I don't know. I can't do it right. I'll need to practice more. But after the brawl, I didn't even watch Kick-Assia. I didn't watch it because it just looked really stupid, and I think it really was really stupid. The thing is, as popular as they were, they should not have focused on these movies. It's the same way with the AVGN. They should not have focused on movies that kind of showcase themselves. Because unless you're a fan of Channel Awesome, you're not going to know all the various in-jokes and stuff like that. And besides, you have the opportunity to make a real movie. Do it. Don't. And I know I'm just saying don't try to become a real comedian, but don't try to make a feature-length review that's just going to look as cringy as all hell. Like, okay, the big problem with Kick-Assia is it was kind of, as people would say today, cringy. It just is like, it's like a movie, but not as good. Or it doesn't have a plot that's any good, and then to boldly flee and all the rest, the problem was, it was far too self-indulgent. And I think that's the case also with the AVGN movie. I've heard the AVGN movie isn't that bad. I still don't think the AVGN movie was necessary. I think James Rolfe, if he'd been intelligent. I mean, obviously he thought he was doing a good job, but I think for him, he should have focused on making a real movie. And I'm not talking like a comedy or anything like that. I'm talking like a horror movie, something like that. Maybe hired a writer, and he could have directed. Because James Rolfe can direct. He can do that pretty well. I saw his student film, Legend of the Blue Hole, and it was really good. It had great direction. It had a pretty good plot. It was sort of like a modern-day version of The Twilight Zone. That was good. He did a good job at that. Sadly, once again, it's all too tied up in the AVGN mindset. And, it does make sense. It'll have the name appeal, but ultimately it'll only appeal to AVGN fans. I guess what I'm saying is, like with many things, you kind of have to take it all in proportion with everything else. You can't just focus on the Nostalgia Critic, but you can't move too far away from it because then you'll alienate the fans. It's essentially, you have to evolve certain concepts. Like with my channel. I'm not holding myself up as the paragon of virtue here. I'm just showing that many of the things that are very popular evolve over time. And evolution is necessary. Is probably the best way to do things. Because if it's too different, then it alienates the fans you already have, and it might not be good to begin with. It's basically take what works and just evolve from there. I think that's the best way to do it. And I think that's generally what you'll see is most successful. Like we can look at Star Wars. They stuck with what worked, and thus they made millions of dollars or billions of dollars. They didn't, turn it into a bloody rom-com. I guess that's the best way to put it. So it's like, you got your Nostalgia Critic episodes, instead of turning it into this sketch comedy show that no one really likes that much, you should instead just keep the Nostalgia Critic as he is and just evolve subtly from there. It's the same way with my channel, it's like I have evolved over time to change, I was based heavily, on the Nostalgia Critic, my own style of comedy, and somewhat of a spoony mindset, and you can see already some of my more unique elements, although I imagine other YouTubers do it as well. you know, with like weapon reviews and being very specific about history and stuff like that. That's sort of a thing I did, and I'm pretty sure other people do it as well, but still, it's sort of like my thing. But I didn't like change it into where I was like being super normal and all the rest, or super mainstream and all the rest. I don't know. It's very hard to make it in the entertainment industry. You have to be very careful with what you do, because if you do, it's like with anything. If you do too much, it's not good enough. If you do too little, it's also not good enough. And I fucking hate those goddamn Hauptsturmführers, because they fucking chuck grenades, and any grenade throwing enemy is a fucking bastard. Because in Project Brutality, some of the enemies that look kind of like those Hauptsturmführers love throwing fucking grenades, and they blow you up like it was nothing. And like, that's where you can literally just die in like a second. If you haven't saved, you go all the way fucking back. What if I could just rest and like regenerate my health? Makes me think of, I think like Morrowind, you could regain your health that way. There's a number of games that you can regain health by just going to sleep. Oh yeah, and also Elder Scrolls Arena. Elder Scrolls Arena, I have a Let's Try to Play up on the main channel from years ago. In that game, getting out of that dungeon, it's almost impossible. I didn't do it in that episode. It's like, that dungeon is fucking brutal. Brutal arena. But it is pretty terrible. It is pretty terribly difficult. To the point, okay, now I'm turned around. I blame you guys, the fans. Always blame the fans and lag. Do both. And you'll always succeed. Let's see, where was I? Yeah, it's very hard to get out of there, and the only way to regain health that I could figure out was you literally make camp and go to sleep. So it's like, okay, we're gonna fight a goblin, and then, alright, I'm just gonna sack out for a couple hours. You wake up, and you're perfectly fine. Okay, we gotta find a gold key. I just love the Sturmgewehr, and we gotta get our health pizza. A pizza increases my health. Pizza. It is a delicious meal, although finding the right kind of pizza is always difficult. Although, like, Domino's and places like that have definitely increased in overall deliciousness as time has gone on. There's a pizza place a number of years ago. It's been over a decade since I last went there. Called Cece's Pizza. And Smacky Smack. Called Cece's Pizza. They used to have an absolute perfect cheese pizza. I don't know if a pizza connoisseur would like it, but I know I enjoyed it. And then they changed their pizza recipe, and it wasn't ever as good again. And that's one of the reasons why I stopped going. Because, you know, not all pizza is created equal. There are some pizzas that are better than others. There's some pizzas that have a better texture than others. And ultimately, finding the right pizza is always a bit difficult. Now, of course, you can have your generic pizzas like your Domino's, but it's always looking for the pizza of the highest quality. And yeah, look for the highest quality foods. Although maybe not the most expensive stuff, though. Because price does not necessarily ensure quality. That's one of the things you gotta remember. Just because you throw money at something doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna be better than something cheaper. Like, for example, there's actually an interesting YouTube video on a $1,000 pizza versus a dollar pizza. And let me tell you this, I'd rather have the buck pizza than the $1,000 pizza. Because, like, the $1,000 pizza has caviar and looks like the nastiest shit you'd ever see. Whereas the dollar pizza is just a pizza. Actually reminds me of a fancy-ass pizza restaurant I went to once. It was once. Only once. When I was living in Utah. It was the nastiest pizza I've ever had. I guess if you're a pizza connoisseur, it'd be like, ooh, this cheese is so amazing. It was the shittiest shit that ever shitted it up. Okay, like, it was just disgusting. I think the crust wasn't bad. But, like, the cheese looked... The cheese didn't even look good. It looked like it was half rotted. I don't even know what kind... Fuck that guy. Actually reminds me of a really horrible joke. Well, it's not a horrible joke, but it still was a joke from Axis in Time, where fucking Himmler's trying to use PowerPoint, and it doesn't work right, and he's like, and they called me the war criminal. It's like, John Birmingham, man, he had a sense of humor. All that picture today, it's like, that's terrible. How could they joke about something like that? It's like, fucking grow a sense of humor, although sense of humors are in short supply these days. But let's see, where was I? Yeah, the nasty-ass pizza. Just the worst you could imagine. And it was expensive, too. It was also... It was what... That was my attempt at, like, a fancy meal, and it was gross. It was like, I had that nasty pizza that was expensive, along with some kind of fancy-ass wine that was also expensive. The wine was gross, the pizza was bad, and ultimately it was unenjoyable experience. Well, I literally threw it. I didn't eat all that pizza. I took it home, and I was like, okay, maybe I'll try it again later. Try it again later. You know what? Fucking chuck that shit in the dumpster. Oh, fuck. I always hate it when they got somebody in there. Ultimately, I'm GeneralLotz, wishing you good Domino's pizza, or Pizza Hut pizza, although that shit's kind of greasy, or at least it was the last time I had it. Or whatever, makes you happy.